And I think that's you've really put your finger right on it, because it's one thing to say the other guy's terrible, and you could even say I can do better. But once you step into the big chair and all of a sudden the reins of power handed to you, it's a different kettle of fish. And that's what I think Biden's finding out, is that he's spent 40 years in politics, but doesn't have much to show for it. He's never been anywhere near this kind of influential, and now all of a sudden he's got to make life, in his hands are the lives of millions of people in the military. He's got crises, and he's every day there's going to be another crisis he's going to have to deal with. That's just the way the presidency works. And there's a reason why presidents take a lot of time go off golfing. It's just to blow off some steam, because, the stuff that they know that they can't tell you, that they because of national security, that they carry around with them. There's a reason why presidents and prime ministers and national leaders age so quickly when they're in office, because of the burdens that office places on them. And when you listen to him talk, and when you pay attention to his body language, you think to yourself, how is this guy going to last 4 months, never mind 4 years? He mumbles, he stumbles over his words, he has to stop and think, he sticks his foot in his mouth. And, Trump could be accused of doing some of the same things, but it wasn't because his mental faculties were in trouble. It's just that's the way he communicated. I mean, take away his cell phone and cancel his Twitter account, and 90% of the people who object to him are gone. But in Biden's case, there's just something about the man that does not inspire confidence, because he doesn't have any confidence in himself. It certainly looks that way to me when I watch him. So I think that's going to be his biggest challenge, is if he is going to be any kind of president at all, he's got a lot of growing up to do. And the man's already in his late 70s.
Yeah, I think that Joe Biden's biggest issue, is going to be, honestly, his health. He just doesn't look healthy.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. And I'm not saying that from a partisan point of view. Left-wing, right-wing, Democrat, Republican, conservative, raving socialist, one way or the other, what you want in the White House is somebody who is healthy and somewhat robust, and who's not going to, become a ditherer because of health issues. So, now that you raise the health concern, and put your finger on it, Nick, the reality is, from my perspective, I think that would be my greatest concern. I don't think he's up for the job for 4 years. Now, I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to see the guy collapse in the middle of his presidency and, God forbid, die. And then you're stuck with the Kamala Harris presidency. And,
yeah.
What would that look like? But even a Harris presidency would, they're going to run into reality. Look, I remember back in 2016 when everybody was, getting on the everybody on the right, or most people on the right, were getting on the Donald Trump bandwagon, and they were talking about all the great things he was going to do, etc. And my answer to that was, yeah, okay, well, we'll see, because it's the constraints that the President of the United States has to operate under are far greater than the constraints that the Prime Minister of Canada has to operate under. Now, we don't have anywhere near, we have a fraction of the influence in the world and the power to back up our desires in the world that the Americans do. So, no biggie, right? But the reality is that, all the other things being equal, the President of the United States does not have the same kind of latitude to do what he wants to do as the Prime Minister of Canada would have. And take, for example, Donald Trump's promise that he was going to build a wall. Well, in the end, he built part of a wall, but he never completed it. And look at the trouble he had doing it. You don't just march into the White House, sign an order and away you go. It's not like running your own construction or your own development company. There's a whole process that has to be followed. And I don't know that Donald Trump was so good at that. And when he fought against the process, and from time to time he ignored it when it was reasonable to ignore it, and for good reasons for the most part. But the reality ends up, sandbagging you, if you will, when you become president of the United States. And I think that'll happen with Joe Biden, and I think it would happen with Kamala Harris as well. But going back to it, Nick, health. His health would be my number one concern.
Yeah, I can see why that would be. Now, and I agree with you. I don't want to see anything bad happen to the guy either. Setting aside even for selfish reasons like, oh my God, we'd have his vice president for president. That would be a horror show unto its own. But just I just don't wish anybody any ill will. I hope that he lives a long and healthy life. But at the same time, you're right. You do have to worry about those kinds of things because of the pressures and the stresses that come with that particular job. It's not easy to be able to handle the kind of pressure, because unless you've actually been there, you really have no idea of what kind of pressure goes on the leader of the secular free world. Like, if you look at how quickly Bill Clinton went gray when he was in the White House. Same thing with George Bush. In 4 years, he turned Snow White. And Ronald Reagan. I mean, all of them showed the pressure physically through the way that they aged while they were in office. And some of it may be self-inflicted, but a lot of it comes from carrying the burdens of responsibility and knowing that your every decision is going to have an impact way beyond anything you've ever decided before. So it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. And I certainly hope that the people behind him, although I don't have much confidence in this, are smart enough to be able to keep the damage to a minimum and keep the pressure on him down to a minimum so that he gets through these however long a term he has to run. So we'll see. But from a political point of view, I think so far he's not off to a good start. And you've already highlighted some of it: the Paris Accord, the XL pipeline, the southern border, the stumbling, bumbling through interviews and stuff like that. All show signs of somebody who is just completely uncomfortable with the job and unfit for it.
Yeah, and one other thing that I will also criticize him for. And that was a news article today that reported, I didn't see his speech, but, governors who are elected officials right across the United States in their own states, there are a number of states where they're reopening their economies, they're removing the mask mandates, they're basically saying, it's time for us to move beyond this whole COVID scare, etc. And rightly or wrongly, okay, these guys they're elected officials too, and whether they're Republicans or they're Democrats, they are owed, by virtue of the seat that they occupy, a certain amount of respect. And what does the President of the United States, Joe Biden, do? He starts talking about, the decisions that he disagrees with, and he has every right to disagree with these decisions. But his response is not, I think they're wrong for this reason and that reason. His response was, well, this is not Neanderthal thinking. And I'm thinking, that was his exact quote, Neanderthal thinking. Well, isn't this exactly the kind of stereotypical response that you're criticizing in Dr. Seuss? Or it's worse? The fact is, if I happen to be a conservative and I think that people should be making these decisions for themselves, and that I don't think that the COVID pandemic was serious enough to justify the kind of measures that the government imposed on people, and that the elected officials of people now are saying the same thing, And what's the response? Again, you can disagree with that assessment. You give me your reasons. Let's have a debate about it. Let's discuss it. Let's argue the point. Let's argue the science, because we can make a very valid scientific argument against a number of these restrictions that we're still living under in Ontario, by the way, in case anyone's forgotten.
Yeah.
But the President of the United States, his response is childish, puerile, frankly idiotic. Well, that's just Neanderthal thinking.
Yeah, that's right. It's maybe Neanderthal's got something on Biden. I don't know, as far as intelligence goes.
I don't know.
But it's just, you just shake your head. Like, that is about as unpresidential a thing as I think you can say without actually using the F-bomb.
Fuddle-duddle.
Because I can't imagine, even Obama, I don't think it ever said anything like that. This is just troglodyte thinking, or this is just Neanderthal thinking, or okay, even if you say it, what do you mean by that? Look, you might say something like, I think this thinking is wrong-headed, and here's why. And based on the information I have at my disposal, and you could argue that there's nobody with more information on this topic than I've got, here's what my logic is behind that comment. Explain yourself that way. It's something a leader would do so that people understand what he's driving at.
Okay, with that, Nick, we're going to have to go for a break. Again, time is just flying by. So, ladies and gentlemen, bottom of the hour, we're going to be coming back. If you're listening to us live, stay put. We're going to have a ruckus final section. If you're listening to us on the podcast, thank you for joining us. And don't forget to tune in again tomorrow morning for part 4 of the Nick and Joe Show for this week on the Think Radio Broadcast Network.